I wanted to make sure that we got this right, which is why we asked Ontario's Integrity Commissioner to give recommendations to us. Today's proposed legislation responds to what we have heard from both Commissioner Wake and from municipalities. We have introduced a path forward that would standardize the code of conduct across the province. We're also proposing a consistent Integrity Commissioner process with stronger penalties for serious violations of the code. Our intent is to increase accountability and make sure that members of municipal councils and boards act in a way that is ethical and responsible. The second piece of legislation that I introduced would provide more independence to lower-tier municipalities in Peel Region so that they can address their growing needs. We're proposing to transfer ownership and maintenance responsibilities of regional roads and associated stormwater infrastructure to Mississauga, Brampton, and Caledon. We're also transferring the responsibility of waste collection from Peel to Mississauga. I've been working with my colleagues across government to make sure that these changes make the most sense for these communities. They are based on the recommendations from the Peel Transition Board and the affected municipalities. Now, to support the transition process, I've asked Ontario's Provincial Land and Development Facilitator to work with the region. We continue to look at options for the transfer of water and wastewater services from Peel as well. But let me be clear that any future outcome would maintain public ownership. With that, I thank you, and I can take any questions that you might have.
I wanted to ask about the threshold for firing a local politician
Yep.
for misconduct. Why do you have to have the unanimous vote of council? I mean, doesn't that make it almost impossible to ever happen?
No, I don't think so. We did hear, as I said, loud and clear from stakeholders that they would like an opportunity to remove somebody from council under the most serious of circumstances. We did ask Commissioner Wake for his recommendations on this. We then circled back with AMO very recently. It is meant to be a high bar, absolutely. There are a number of thresholds that have to be met for an Integrity Commissioner to recommend removal. That recommendation then has to be subsequently approved by the Ontario Integrity Commissioner, not only the local Integrity Commissioner, but the Ontario Integrity Commissioner, and then a unanimous vote of council. There are some that have suggested that we should have the courts do that, but I think I've been quite clear on that, that it is elected officials' responsibility to make decisions on their colleagues in a similar way that we do here in Ontario.
But why not a 2/3 majority or something like that? Because this means that one person could scuttle all this work.
Look, it is meant to be a very high bar. Excuse me. Ultimately, the people will decide in an election. I wanted to have a mechanism, though. I thought it was very important. We heard from municipal councils, municipalities across the province. I asked Commissioner Wake what his thoughts were on this, and then we circled back with AMO. It is meant to be a deliberately high bar. I'm not. I don't want to suggest anything other than that, because ultimately it's the people who will make that decision. But there has to be a mechanism. I've always believed that there has to be a mechanism, and I think we've hit a good balance that will allow councils to address the most egregious of challenges in their community, while respecting the voters of each community.
It's supposed to be back until March 3rd. Why is that?
That minister, I think Minister Clark maybe just recently announced a motion on that in the House. You'd have to ask Minister Clark.
Is this like because you're waiting for the election, or what? Do you have any idea why you're taking a longer break? And what happens with the legislation you just announced?
Yeah, so as you know, on the code of conduct, I also referred the legislation through a motion directly to committee. And the reason that I've done that is that we want to start the process of committee hearings on this bill as soon as possible. By moving to committee after first reading, it also allows for not only immediate consultation across the province and with our partners, it does allow us to address things if there is something that we didn't address within the legislation. It allows for the maximum amount of input in the process. So that work will continue on. As I said, look, we've had a very, very, very busy agenda, and we'll have a very busy spring agenda as well. And I look forward to not only this, but the Peel transition, and of course the legislation we announced earlier today as well with respect to encampments.
Minister, how are you going to go about developing this standardized code of conduct?
Yeah, so that will be developed in the regulations, and I'm glad you asked that, because that is a very important part of this, right? So the regulations will inform what the ultimate standardized code of conduct is. And to be clear, some of the things that we've said to the AMO table that are non-negotiable in this process, and they agree, frankly. There will be one standardized code across 444 municipalities. There will be one standardized process for investigating complaints on the code. I will be guided by the recommendations of the Integrity Commissioner. We've tabled those recommendations as well moments ago in the House as well, so that everybody can have access to that. And that's why I want to send it to committee right away, because I think we'll have to spend some time over the next couple of months working with AMO, working with our municipal partners to get to that standardized code that all 444 municipalities can use. And let me just say another thing on that too, is we did hear from a lot of smaller communities that this can be a very challenging process and a very expensive process for them. And we didn't want to leave them out as well. So there are recommendations there on how we can maybe more communities can use the same integrity commissioner, and how the province can provide a backstop to that process for them, so that everybody can afford a highly responsible commissioner in their communities. So that is the work, though, ultimately. The work of standardizing, that is the work that will be done over the next number of weeks. And we're going to spend a lot of time with AMO on this, and our municipal partners, and frankly the opposition as well.
Are there certain pieces that you feel really strongly should be in this new code of conduct? I know a lot of people who are requesting you do something on this have been talking a lot about this in the context of workplace harassment, for example.
Yeah, and that'll be part of the regulations that are established. We've had any number of challenges across many municipalities, but a lot of unique circumstances. I think when we started this, I said that I was surprised how complex this was. I thought it was going to be a lot easier, if I was being honest, and the more we delved into it, the more complex it became. But he said, I'm encouraged by one thing in particular, is that all of the municipalities that we've talked to, AMO included, Commissioner Wake and his team, who did a really fabulous job on this, they all want to get to the highest standard, and they have are all willing to work together to make sure that it is what we want. One code that addresses all matters that we are currently seeing across the province of Ontario, and that the process is a fair process, both for the people who are making the complaint and the person who has a complaint against them, and that ultimately, as I kept talking about, it has to be a process that will stand the test of any challenge. And I think we've met that with the outline that we've introduced today, and we'll make sure that the regulations do that as well. Yep.
Minister, there are lots of other elected officials, school trustees, various municipal positions.
Yeah.
Will this, and there's MPPs, will this code meet the high standards you want for all elected officials in Ontario?
Yeah, I think the Minister of Education has developed a code, if I'm not mistaken, for school trustees. As well, we already have a provincial code of conduct, and what we're introducing today has a lot of elements of what we see here for the provincial code of conduct, including the potential for financial disclosure of elected officials at the municipal level as well. And that is why we took the step of going to the Ontario Integrity Commissioner and asking for his team's recommendations on how we get to this standardized code across all 444 municipalities. Look, we also found, as we were doing this, there would be sometimes in some communities that we looked at where their integrity commissioner was also doing another job within the community itself, so leading to a potential obvious conflict in a community. So that is something that we are not wanting to see go forward as well, which will be developed in the regulations. At the same time, as I said, we have support from our municipal partners on that, as well as AMO.
You're bypassing second reading for this bill. Are you speeding up the encampments one at all?
No. Look, I'll say this on the encampments one. The funding of the 75.5 million will begin to flow immediately. So the money that has been earmarked for last mile funding, for instance, for shovel-ready affordable housing, we're going to go across communities, and we've spent a lot of time crisscrossing the province, frankly, over the last number of months. There are a lot of communities that have shovel-ready projects with wraparound services affordable housing units at the ready, but just need a few extra dollars of support to get that shovel in the ground. That money will begin to flow immediately, as will the money for improving shelter spaces in communities across the province. That will begin to flow immediately. We'll begin to send letters out tomorrow to service managers across the province, asking for them to identify last mile funding opportunities for shovels in the ground immediately, opportunities to enhance and improve their shelter capacity so that they can deal with the encampments in their communities. We will, of course, insist that any increase in funding that is flowed to a community also comes with a guarantee that they will take actions to remove encampments in their communities as well. So that funding will flow immediately. The legislative part of it, as we said today, while it's introduced today, that will come back to the House in March. There are some tools that municipalities already have. This part of it, the funding part of it, though, was to immediately address some of the challenges that we have with in the shelter, the capacities in our shelter system. So we want to make those tools available and then reflect on what we are seeing from these investments, the outcomes of these investments, and the legislation is there when we come back if we need to escalate further, and we won't hesitate to escalate further if we're not seeing the results that we expect.
What do you mean by escalate further?
As I said, the legislation, if we need to pass legislation, like you saw, I think today in Hamilton, they were talking about an encampment there where somebody had dug trenches and buried wires, and they had a generator going on. We've seen in London fires in encampments. I think from what I'm understanding, the Hamilton example today was less of a homelessness issue and more of a drug trafficking issue. So the legislation will allow us to address that. We'll make the space available for shelters. We'll make last mile funding available to get more affordable housing built and wraparound services built. We're providing funding immediately to our municipal partners that want to participate with us to clean up encampments and to increase their shelter space. And we're also providing funding for those that are in the shelters right now and are ready to transition into market-based housing. We will be making immediate funding available to support in excess of 1,000 people who might be ready to transition out of a shelter and into market-based housing. So all of that will begin to flow as of tomorrow.
You want to see the municipalities start clearing encampments before you introduce the legislation?
The legislation, again, it's the funding is there as of tomorrow, right? It's really there as of today. As of tomorrow, the municipalities are going to be getting a letter from me highlighting that there's funding available for last mile funding for immediate shovel-ready projects. There's funding available to increase shelter capacity, and there's funding available to provide support for people who are in shelters now but are ready to transition into community-based housing. That money is available right now. They'll get the letters tomorrow, and we'll begin hopefully seeing the results of that immediately. This can be in some communities tiny homes to address some of the challenges that they're having. In other communities, they're going to want to have sprung tents so that they can provide greater services for them. In some communities, it's about supporting people who are taking up shelter space right now, but really are ready to get back into the community, but they need that extra assistance, that extra help to allow them to be able to afford market-based housing. The tool that the legislation provides is a tool that allows us to escalate should people not be taking advantage of this extra funding and the extra resources, and should they go back into parks. For situations like we saw today in Hamilton, the legislation will be there. But the first step really is, and always has been, is how do we help the people who really need help in encampments? And you've heard me say this over and over and over and over again, and I don't think anybody disagrees that most of the people in our encampments and tents and parks are suffering from mental health and addiction. And a park is no place for them to be. They need more services. We've heard that loud and clear, and we're going to provide those services, but at the same time, we want our parks back, and we're going to provide the resources so that our communities can take back their parks. Okay? Awesome. Thank you, guys. If I don't see you again, have a...